I never thought family could betray you more painfully than strangers. For 3 years I paid my sister Julia and her fiancé Kyle's bills while they pursued their so-called dreams. Last month at her birthday dinner I overheard them laughing about how they had manipulated their dumb big brother Braxton. The shock froze me, but something inside finally broke free. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to make tough decisions about toxic family members. Family has always been everything to me. After losing our parents in a devastating car accident 6 years ago, it was just me and my little sister Julia left to face the world together. I was 26 at the time, already established in my career as a software engineer at a promising tech company in Seattle. Julia was only 19, just starting her second semester of college, with dreams bigger than the sky. The loss hit us both hard, but in different ways. I channeled my grief into work and responsibility, feeling the weight of being her only family. Julia struggled with her studies, the trauma affecting her ability to focus. I still remember the late-night calls where she would cry, saying she felt lost without our parents' guidance. Those moments cemented my resolve to be there for her no matter what. 3 years ago, Julia met Kyle during her junior year. She called me, excitement bubbling in her voice, like I had not heard since before the accident. Kyle was charming, ambitious, and had big plans. He was 24 then, already talking about tech startups and disrupting industries. Julia was completely captivated by his vision and confidence. When they visited me that Christmas, Kyle spent hours talking about his business ideas. He had this concept for an app that would revolutionize how people shared rides in urban areas. His eyes would light up when discussing potential investors and market demographics. I was genuinely impressed and found myself believing in his potential. A few months later, Julia called with news that changed everything. She had decided to take a break from college to pursue modeling opportunities that had suddenly materialized. Kyle had connections in the industry, she explained, and her unique look was exactly what agencies were searching for. The timing seemed perfect, as Kyle was also at a crucial stage with his startup concept. They laid out their 3-year plan with such conviction. Kyle would build his business, while Julia established herself in modeling. They estimated it would take about 36 months before both ventures became profitable. The only obstacle was financial stability during this building phase. I remember sitting in my apartment that night after their call, staring at my bank accounts. I had been saving for a down payment on a house, a dream I had held since watching our parents struggle with rent throughout my childhood. The amount would cover about 3 years of essential expenses for Julia and Kyle while they pursued their dreams. The decision felt obvious to me. My sister deserved her shot at happiness, and I was in a position to help. The next day I called them and offered to cover their rent, utilities, and basic living expenses until they got on their feet. The joy in Julia's voice when I told her made any hesitation vanish. My life adjusted around this new responsibility. I took on additional projects at work, earning bonuses, and a promotion to senior engineer. My social life became minimal, limited to occasional beers with my best friend Sam, who worked in the same building. Dating became an afterthought. When asked, I would simply explain that I was focused on career growth, never mentioning the second household I was supporting. Sam was the only one who knew the full story, and his concerns started early. 6 months into the arrangement over drinks at our usual spot, he questioned whether I was being taken advantage of. "Braxton, I get helping family, but this sounds like an open-ended commitment," he said, nursing his beer. "Have you seen any concrete progress from either of them?" I defended them immediately, showing him Julia's Instagram posts of casting calls and modeling workshops she had attended. I mentioned Kyle's regular updates about meetings with potential investors and prototype developments. "I am just making sure my little sister gets the chances I had," I explained. "Our parents would have wanted that." Sam nodded but did not seem convinced. "Just make sure you are not putting your life on hold for promises that might never materialize." I brushed off his concerns, focusing instead on the regular social media updates from Julia and Kyle that showcased their journey. Julia would post photos from what she called networking events in elegant venues. Kyle shared cryptic but optimistic updates about business meetings and growth potential. Each post reinforced my belief that I was doing the right thing, investing in their future. The checks I wrote each month felt like deposits into a shared family dream, one where Julia would find her passion and success. My own dreams could wait. After all, what was the point of success if you could not share it with the people you loved most? By the middle of the second year, small inconsistencies began to surface in Julia and Kyle's story. I noticed that Kyle would enthusiastically discuss a business direction for weeks, then suddenly pivot to something completely different, without explaining what happened to the original plan. First it was the rideshare app, then a cryptocurrency exchange platform, followed by a social media tool for influencers. Each new idea was presented with the same conviction, each supposedly just months away from securing funding. Julia's modeling career showed similar patterns of inconsistency. She would mention a big casting call, then never reference it again. When I would ask about the outcome, she would quickly change the subject or mention an even more exciting opportunity on the horizon. Despite claiming to attend multiple auditions weekly, she never seemed to face rejection or booking confirmations. What I could not ignore were their social media accounts. While claiming financial struggles and career building, Julia's Instagram showed an increasing collection of designer clothes and accessories. Kyle began posting photos from expensive restaurants, always with vague captions about business meetings or networking opportunities. The first real alarm bell rang when I reviewed my credit card statement one Sunday morning. I had given Julia an emergency card on my account for unexpected necessities. That month there were charges from high-end boutiques, totaling nearly $2,000. When I called to ask about it, Julia sounded defensive. I needed proper outfits for important casting calls, Braxton. You do not understand how this industry works. Appearance is everything, she explained, her voice taking on an unfamiliar sharp edge. I was going to tell you, but I have been so busy with appointments. These are investments in my career. Kyle got on the phone and backed her story, adding that they were close to a breakthrough. He mentioned a promising investor meeting the following week. They both promised to be more transparent about expenses moving forward and assured me they would start repaying everything within months. I wanted to believe them, but doubt had taken root. The following week I decided to check in about the investor meeting Kyle had mentioned. My call went to voicemail. 3 days passed before Julia returned my call, explaining that they had been swamped with opportunities. When I asked specifically about the investor, she provided vague responses about ongoing negotiations and confidentiality agreements. Their repayment promises followed a similar pattern. Each month brought new explanations for delays, a contract still being finalized, payment processing issues, unexpected industry slowdowns. Each excuse was followed by assurances that everything would be resolved by the next month. The requests also began to escalate. What started as covering essential bills expanded to include requests for new technology. Kyle needed the latest laptop for development work. Julia required professional camera equipment for her portfolio. There was a weekend workshop in Los Angeles that would be career-changing for both of them, requiring airfare and accommodations. I continued to provide, though, with growing reluctance. The dream of helping my sister achieve success still outweighed my concerns, but the weight of that dream was becoming heavier. A disturbing glimpse of reality came 9 months ago. Kyle called me late on a Saturday night, his words slurring slightly. He had clearly been drinking and seemed to think he was talking to someone else initially. "Man, we got the good life figured out." He laughed into the phone. "Why hustle when you can just, you know?" There was a pause, then confusion in his voice. "Wait, Braxton. Shit, I thought you were Mike." When I pressed him about what he meant, he quickly sobered up and changed the subject. But the comment lingered in my mind, impossible to dismiss. The most revealing moment came at a coffee shop near my office. I ran into Patrick, who had been friends with Julia during her college years. After casual catching up, he mentioned being surprised to see Julia and Kyle at an expensive resort in Palm Springs on social media. She was telling everyone how her controlling brother would freak out if he knew they were there. Patrick said, clearly unaware of my financial support. She was bragging about how easy it is to get money from you because you feel guilty about your parents. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth as Patrick continued, unaware of the impact of his words. "She has been saying stuff like that for years, man. I thought you knew. That is why I stopped hanging out with them. The way they talk about you behind your back just did not sit right with me. That conversation shattered something fundamental in my understanding of our relationship. Still, I held on to hope that Patrick had misunderstood or exaggerated. I could not reconcile the sister I loved with the person he described. As the third year of support approached, communication became increasingly strained. Julia and Kyle would go weeks without responding to messages, then suddenly appear with urgent financial requests. Our conversations became transactional, centered around money and little else. The warmth that had characterized our relationship since childhood had cooled to a formal, uncomfortable exchange. Despite the mounting evidence, a part of me still believed in them. Perhaps they were just struggling with the pressure of trying to succeed, I reasoned. Perhaps they felt embarrassed by their lack of progress. I made excuses for their behavior, unwilling to face the possibility that my sacrifice had been meaningless, that my trust had been misplaced. The breaking point came 5 weeks ago, at Julia's 25th birthday dinner. I had reserved a private section at Luciana's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown that she had always wanted to try. The reservation was for 7:30, but I arrived at 7, wanting to make sure everything was perfect. The hostess showed me to our table, in a secluded corner of the restaurant, and informed me that my guests had not yet arrived. After getting settled, I decided to visit the restroom before Julia and Kyle arrived. The restaurant had a unique layout, with the restrooms located down a hallway that wrapped around the private dining sections. As I approached, I heard familiar laughter coming from the smoking patio adjacent to the hallway. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I could see Julia and Kyle already arrived, but apparently killing time before meeting me. I was about to call out to them when I heard my name mentioned, stopping me cold. "Braxton will probably give you some expensive gift again," Kyle was saying between drags on his cigarette. "The walking ATM never disappoints." Julia laughed, a sound that cut through me like glass. "He is so predictable. Big brother to the rescue, always trying to fill the void our parents left." 3 years of free living, Kyle said, raising his glass in a mock toast. "And he still has no clue about Palm Springs or Cabo, or that cryptocurrency investment. The guy is such a workaholic he never even checks what we are actually doing." My sister nodded, taking a sip of what looked like expensive whiskey. "Remember when he called about those boutique charges, and I fed him that line about investing in my career? He totally bought it. I have not been to an actual casting in over a year. Why bother when you have got a cash cow?" Kyle laughed, putting his arm around her. "I say we milk this for at least another 5 years. By then your trust fund kicks in anyway." Poor Braxton, Julia sighed, though there was no real sympathy in her voice. So desperate for family, he cannot see what is right in front of him. Always the lonely, responsible one. "To the dumbest smart guy we know," Kyle raised his glass again. "May he never wise up." I stood frozen, unable to move or announce my presence. Each word they spoke pierced through the careful narrative I had constructed about our relationship. The betrayal was not just financial, but a complete mockery of the love and sacrifice I had offered. They were not just taking advantage of me, they were actively enjoying the deception. I retreated silently and returned to our table, my mind racing. The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too constraining. I considered leaving, avoiding the confrontation entirely. But something had shifted inside me. The shock was giving way to a clarity I had been avoiding for years. 20 minutes later, Julia and Kyle arrived at the table, all smiles and birthday excitement. Julia hugged me tightly, complimenting the restaurant choice. Kyle shook my hand firmly, asking about work and making small talk, as if nothing was wrong. Their performance was flawless, and I realized with a sickening feeling that this was because they had been performing for years. Throughout the meal, I went through the motions, ordering wine, discussing safe topics, even managing to sing happy birthday when the dessert arrived. They seemed oblivious to my internal turmoil, so confident in their manipulation that they could not see the change in me. As the server cleared our dessert plates, Kyle leaned forward with that now familiar look of excitement I had seen countless times. "Brax, we have got amazing news." He began using the nickname I had always hated. "We have found the perfect opportunity, a real game changer. A friend of mine is starting a tech incubator, invitation only, but he has got a spot for us. It requires an initial buy-in, but the returns are guaranteed. Julia jumped in her eyes wide with practiced enthusiasm. It is exactly what we have been working toward all this time. Everything is about to pay off, just like we said it would. I looked between them, seeing clearly for the first time the practiced nature of their pitch. How many times had I heard some version of this exact conversation? "How much do you need?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Kyle named a figure that made my eyebrows raise. It was more than double anything they had asked for previously. They must have interpreted my expression as hesitation rather than anger, because they both launched into rehearsed reassurances. "I know it sounds like a lot," Julia said, reaching for my hand across the table, "but this is the last thing we will ever need to ask for. After this, we will be able to pay you back everything." Something inside me finally snapped. 3 years of suppressed doubts, ignored warnings, and dismissed red flags crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. Like the Cabo trip paid me back, or the Palm Springs weekend, I asked quietly. Their expressions froze confusion, and then panic flashing across their faces. Or perhaps the cryptocurrency investment. "You have been hiding from me, Kyle. What are you talking about?" Julia attempted to recover, but her voice wavered. "I heard you both, outside before dinner. Every word about the walking ATM, the dumbest smart guy you know, how I am so desperate for family I cannot see what is right in front of me." The color drained from their faces. Kyle started to form denials, but I held up my hand. "Do not bother. It is actually impressive the performance you have both been putting on. 3 years of absolutely nothing but lies. Braxton, you do not understand." Julia began, tears now forming in her eyes. "We were just joking around. You know how Kyle gets when he drinks. Joking." I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air between us. "Was it a joke when you said you have not been to a casting in over a year? Or when you discussed milking me for 5 more years until your trust fund kicks in?" Kyle shifted strategies, his face hardening. "Look, you are overreacting. We were always going to pay you back. Family helps family. You owed us this after getting all the advantages growing up." I actually laughed at that, a short, bitter sound. Advantages: I worked 2 jobs through college while living in a studio apartment I could barely afford. Every advantage I have, I earned. And family does help family, Kyle. But what you two have been doing is not family, it is fraud. I pulled out my wallet and placed my credit card on the table to pay for the meal. Then I looked directly at my sister, whose tears were now flowing freely. "As of right now, I am cutting off all financial support. The rent is paid through the end of next month, so you have 30 days to figure out your next steps. The utilities will stay on until then too. After that, you are on your own." "You cannot do this," Julia gasped, genuine panic replacing the performance. "We have no savings. No backup plan." "Exactly," I said, rising from my chair. "It is time you both faced reality. 3 years is more than enough time to launch a career if you are actually trying." Kyle stood too, his face flushed with anger. "You think you can just cut us off? After all this time? What kind of brother does that?" I looked at him steadily. "The kind who finally realizes he has been enabling destructive behavior instead of helping. The kind who is done being manipulated by people who view him as nothing but a resource to exploit." As I turned to leave, Julia grabbed my arm, desperation in her voice. "Please, Braxton. We will change. We will get real jobs. Just give us another chance." For a brief moment, seeing my little sister in distress nearly weakened my resolve. But then I remembered her laughter, as she mocked my loneliness, the calculated way they had exploited my desire to help. "I have given you chances. 3 years of chances. Now it is time for you to stand on your own feet. Maybe then you will understand the value of what you have thrown away." I walked out of the restaurant, ignoring the scene they were creating behind me. For the first time in 3 years, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. The pain was still there, a raw wound that would take time to heal, but beneath it was something unexpected: relief. The following weeks unfolded exactly as I had expected. The initial barrage of messages ranged from hostile accusations to tearful pleas. Julia called me heartless, claiming I was abandoning her just like our parents had. Kyle alternated between threats about legal action and awkward attempts at reconciliation. I maintained my position, responding only to acknowledge that my decision was final. As the 30-day deadline approached, their tactics intensified. Julia contacted our distant relative, spinning a story about me suddenly cutting her off without reason. Several family members I barely spoke with called to question my decision. I explained the situation calmly, offering to show them 3 years of financial records if they were truly concerned about Julia's welfare. They reached out to Sam next, hoping my best friend might intervene on their behalf. Sam, who had witnessed the entire situation unfold, simply told them Braxton should have done this 2 years ago. Their attempt backfired when Sam called me afterward to express his relief that I had finally established boundaries. The day the rent payment would have been due came and went. I received a final desperate message from Julia, informing me they were being forced to leave their luxury apartment. She described in detail how they were downsizing to a barely habitable one-bedroom in a less desirable neighborhood, clearly hoping the guilt would change my mind. I simply wished them well in their new place. 2 weeks after moving, Kyle left. Julia called me at 3 a.m, sobbing incoherently about how he had packed his things while she was at work and left only a brief note saying he needed space to pursue opportunities independently. The engagement was off after 3 years. I listened quietly as she poured out her hurt and betrayal, the irony of the situation not lost on me. "I do not understand how he could just leave when things got difficult," she cried. "After everything we have been through together, I could have pointed out the parallels to how they had treated me, but instead simply asked, 'What are you going to do now?'" There was a long pause before she answered, her voice smaller than I had heard it in years. "I got a job. Nothing special. Just administrative work at a dental office. It barely covers rent and food, but it is something." That was the first honest conversation we had had in years. I did not offer financial help, and surprisingly, she did not ask for it. The call ended awkwardly, but it felt like a tiny step towards something real. Over the following months, Julia and I maintained minimal contact. Occasionally, she would text about mundane things, a difficult customer at the new retail job she had taken on weekends to make ends meet, an affordable recipe she had discovered at a free community event she had attended. These messages contained none of the manufactured excitement or implied requests that had characterized our previous interactions. They were just normal updates from someone learning to navigate adult life. 6 months after that fateful birthday dinner, I received an email from Julia that changed everything. Unlike her usual brief texts, this was several paragraphs long, clearly composed with care. She began by acknowledging everything without excuses or deflection. She admitted to the lies, the manipulation, and the mockery. She described how losing our parents had created a fear in her that she had never properly addressed, a fear of having to stand on her own. Kyle had seemed like security at first, then became a partner in avoiding responsibility. Together they had convinced themselves that they were entitled to my support, that eventually their fictional careers would materialize and justify everything. "These months of actual independence have been the hardest and most important of my life," she wrote. "For the first time, I understand what it means to be truly responsible for myself. I know now what you have been doing since we lost Mom and Dad, and I am ashamed that instead of appreciating your sacrifice, I exploited it." She ended by saying she did not expect forgiveness or a renewed relationship, but wanted me to know that my difficult decision had ultimately forced her to grow in ways she had been avoiding for years. I read the email several times before responding, testing my own feelings. The hurt was still there, but it had dulled from a sharp pain to a tender bruise. I suggested meeting for coffee the following weekend, a neutral territory for what would be our first face-to-face conversation in months. The Julia who met me at the coffee shop was noticeably different from the sister I had known. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. She looked simpler but somehow more authentic. She spoke about her 2 jobs, the night classes she had enrolled in to finish her degree, and the small but genuine friendships she was building with coworkers. There were no grand plans or exciting opportunities on the horizon, just modest, realistic goals and an appreciation for gradual progress. We did not immediately return to the closeness we once had. Trust once broken so thoroughly takes considerable time to rebuild, but that coffee meeting became the first of many. Every few weeks, we would meet and talk honestly about our lives, our feelings, and slowly about our relationship as siblings. Meanwhile, my own life had expanded in the space created by ending my financial support of Julia and Kyle. I finally purchased the home I had been saving for, a modest but comfortable 3-bedroom house with a small backyard. I started dating again and met Rachel, a compassionate but straightforward woman who worked as a physical therapist. When I eventually shared the story of Julia and Kyle with her, her response was refreshingly direct. "You cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm," she said simply. "Helping someone is different from enabling them." Her words crystallized the lesson I had been struggling to articulate. True support sometimes means allowing people to face the consequences of their choices. By removing the financial safety net that enabled Julia's avoidance of responsibility, I had actually given her something much more valuable: the opportunity to discover her own strength and capability. The money I had once sent to Julia and Kyle now goes into a savings account for future family emergencies. A real safety net, rather than a subsidy for deception. Julia and I have established clear boundaries about money, agreeing that our relationship must exist independent of financial entanglement. Last week, Julia graduated with her associate degree in business administration, an achievement earned through 2 years of balancing work and night classes. I attended the small ceremony, genuinely proud of what she had accomplished through her own determination and effort. As we walked to our cars afterward, she turned to me with unexpected seriousness. "Thank you for cutting me off," she said quietly. "It was the best thing anyone has ever done for me, even though I hated you for it at the time." Looking back at the past year, I realized that sometimes the most caring action is also the most difficult. By ending the financial support that enabled Julia's dependency, I gave her the gift of self-reliance. By refusing to continue our unhealthy dynamic, I created space for a more authentic relationship to eventually emerge. The wounds of betrayal have largely healed, replaced by a cautious but growing trust based on honesty rather than obligation. Julia continues to build her independent life, making mistakes sometimes, but facing them directly, rather than looking for rescuers or scapegoats. As for me, I have learned that true love sometimes requires setting boundaries that feel painful in the moment, but lead to growth and health in the long term. If you have ever found yourself supporting someone who takes your help for granted, remember that sometimes letting go is the greatest form of love you can offer. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ultimately helped someone grow? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more real-life lessons, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening, and remember, setting boundaries is not selfish. It is essential for healthy relationships.